Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that honestly is one of the most painful yet totally misunderstood paradoxes of our time. Think about it. We live in an era where we are more connected than ever before in human history. We've got vast, sprawling social networks sitting right in our pockets. And yet, despite this 24/7 connectivity, so many of us are feeling deeply, profoundly isolated. So let's just dive right into this. We're going to look at the very architecture of modern loneliness together and finally figure out why our social lives feel exactly the way they do.
So why do you feel invisible? Look, you've probably been here before. Picture this. You're at a party, you've hit all the right social cues, you laughed at the right jokes, maybe you even hid in the bathroom for 5 minutes just to scroll your phone. You've essentially performed the connection perfectly. And yet, you walk away feeling, well, surgically invisible. Or maybe it's that really visceral 3 a.m. feeling where you're just lying in bed, scrolling and scrolling through a seemingly endless list of friends and contacts, but you feel completely alone. You might tell yourself that, you just haven't found your people yet, or maybe you're just socially exhausted. But as we're going to see, that explanation is actually entirely wrong. 500. Think about that number. You probably have hundreds of friends right there on a screen. Maybe 500, maybe 1,000. But here's the critical test. Out of those 500 contacts, how many could you actually call in the middle of the night if your world was falling apart? For so many of us, that number drops from 500 down to 0. We've basically industrialized our social lives into this massive catalog of options. We're suffering from a collector's mentality, where gathering contacts costs absolutely nothing, but more importantly, it nourishes us even less. Now, if you're feeling this way, I really need you to relieve yourself of that immediate guilt. This is not a personal flaw. Your loneliness, it's not a defect in your personality. Rather, it's a diagnosis of how our modern world has been structurally engineered. You're actually protecting a structure you simply haven't questioned yet. We've been trained, and definitely not by accident, but by our culture, to literally consume people. We've turned human connection into a product category, and it's fundamentally altering how we relate to one another. Moving on to Section 1, Understanding Liquid Love. To actually pull back the curtain on why our connections feels simultaneously so abundant and yet completely hollow, we've got to look at the work of sociologist Zygmunt Bauman. He spent decades watching modern life do something entirely unprecedented to our bonds, and he coined this brilliant term, liquid love. In this liquid world, everything solid dissolves. Permanence? It's treated as a trap. We've essentially been handed a consumer mindset and told to go out and build intimacy with it. And then, tragically, we sit around wondering why nothing lasts. We're approaching relationships the exact same way we approach endless swiping on an app, just expecting this perfectly curated, totally frictionless experience. Which brings us to Section 2, the paradox of choice. Because think about what happens when we browse human beings like a catalog that never ends. Our brains quietly adapt. When someone can be replaced with a simple swipe, we just stop treating individuals as irreplaceable. Why put in the really hard work of deep connection when there is a frictionless fantasy waiting right behind the next profile? When you know an alternative is always available, relational investment feels completely optional. So what do? We go wide instead of deep. We choose breadth over depth. And it's fundamentally altering our capacity for real intimacy. All right, Section 3, the industrialization of loneliness. You see, there is a profound, fundamental difference between just being consumed and actually being known. Because we've started treating people as products to be audited, we never allow anyone close enough to actually know us. Being consumed, oh, that's easy. It's frictionless and it leaves you completely unchanged. But being known, that is uncomfortable, it's deep, it requires real, terrifying vulnerability. It means showing the messy, flawed parts of yourself that a liquid culture constantly tells you to hide. So instead of being known, we kind of just settle for the simulation of closeness. We perform our identities perfectly to signal closeness to our vast networks. But here's the catch. This simulation provides absolutely zero emotional nourishment. It's literally the social equivalent of eating junk food. You feel full for a fleeting moment, but you are slowly starving to death on an emotional level because you're avoiding the uncomfortable work of genuine vulnerability. And that leads us to Section 4. Choosing solid love. Okay, so how do we fix this? Here is a specific protocol for making this transformation. First, you have to consciously decide to treat another human being as a person, not a product. True friendship demands radical decisions over frictionless fantasies. It demands deciding that one specific, flawed person is actually worth your investment. Second, you've got to tolerate what's called the death of the beginning.
getting past that electric neurochemical high of novelty and actively choosing to stay for the slow, often boring, but incredibly vital work of the middle. And finally, you have to learn to repair conflict rather than just using the clean escape of ghosting or exit strategies. I really want to pause on that last point for a second because, man, we get this completely wrong all the time. In a liquid culture, the second there's friction, we automatically assume it's a sign of incompatibility and we quickly jump to the next option. But that is a massive trap. Conflict is not a sign of incompatibility. It's simply evidence of two different interiors trying to share life. It's a necessary, entirely healthy building block of deep relationships. If you just run away at the very first sign of conflict, you're never going to build anything solid. Which brings us to what is probably the hardest truth of this entire explainer. The freedom you think you are protecting by keeping things loose is actually an incapacity for risk. Let that sink in for a moment. You aren't just a victim of this liquid culture, you're its willing participant every single time you keep one foot out the door just to protect your freedom. Real commitment is not the end of possibility. No, it's the condition for a very specific kind of possibility. The kind where two people stop auditing each other and finally start building. So I want to leave you with this final provocative question. When will you choose to stay and be seen? When are you going to stop auditing your relationships and start building a solid internal ground? True connection requires you to step out of that frictionless fantasy, to tolerate the uncomfortable reality of being known, and to finally take the risk of commitment. Think about a moment when you chose to stay instead of retreating into the noise, because that is exactly where solid love begins. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Until next time, keep questioning the architecture around you.